So tell me a little bit about the progression of your fly tying and fly fishing career. Was it about the chicken or the egg?
Well, I grew up in a small country town and we never had access to anything. You know, we never had flies that you could go down the street and buy. First rod I bought from Geelong, and I bought fly tying materials a week later because you had to tie flies, you know, because you couldn't buy them. So it sort of progressed from there, but I think my biggest benefit was that I'm self-taught. I wasn't told this is the way it's done and this is the way it has to be done. And, you know, it was just, if you had an idea, you just worked out how to do it. And it went from there. That's why a few of my flies are a bit different. But yeah, so I was, and basically I suppose it was a chicken and the egg thing. The fly fishing came first, but it was only a week later that, you know, I had to go and hatch the chicken to get the feathers to tie the flies, you know. It's, yeah, that's how it worked. And I bought a book. Well, actually one of my friends, Beastie, Brian Fawn, bought me a book, an old Fadge Griffith book, How to Tie a Fishing Fly. And I sort of looked in that and got ideas of what to do from there, and then I started to buy a few magazines and looked in, but the magazines made no sense, particularly with the fishing wise. You know, the fly tying was okay, but the fishing wise, the magazines made no sense at all, because they have little pictures of rivers and little arrows where fish should be and what direction they're facing. Well, I'd go down to the Mount Emu Creek or the Hopkins or the Maori and nah, that's not how it works. It was years later I bought a book, Fishing for the Educated Trout by John Sattell, and he talked about ambushing fish and finding fish and setting traps, and that made perfect sense to what we do down here. And yeah, that's how we fish down here in the rivers now, and it gives the fish more chance to look at your fly, so your fly has to be a little bit better. You can't get away with imperfections, and like imperfections, I don't mean too many turns of hackle or too many ribs. It's more about the balance of the fly in the water. It's got to look natural. It can't be hanging straight up and down. You know, you need, for a lot of your wet flies, you need all the weight in the front third of the fly. So the front third of the fly pulls the leader down, and the back part's just sort of floats along behind it. But eventually, when it gets down to its depth, it will just hang straight down. But, you know, if you look in nature, the little bugs don't hang straight down in the water. You know, they're swimming pretty much level, so we have to get our flies to swim pretty much level. And, yeah, so that's sort of where all that sort of came from. I've spent hours in the water out here at Purrumbete, swimming in amongst the weeds with friends casting flies to me just to see how they react in the water, see how they swim, try and get them to look real. And that's where I come up with a lot of my weird ideas that wet flies should be tied on up-eyed hooks, not on down-eyed hooks. Because if your fly's under the water, the eye on an up-eyed hook goes back, follows your leader back to the surface, so you're getting a straight pull. With a down eye, it's you know, you're getting an angled pull on it, so it's not going to just cruise along quite as well. And also, if you put weight at the front of it, like a bead, it's going to turn upside down, because gravity says the heaviest bit has to be at the bottom. So the bead will be the heaviest bit, so it'll flip upside down. So then you've effectively got an up-eyed hook, but your fly's upside down. But yeah, you know, there's a few little things like that. Flies still work, you know, you don't have to do all this sort of stuff, but I think it does make a bit of a difference.
Which leads me to ask, do you think that being a fly tyer makes you a better fly angler?
Yes and no. You know, it's being someone who just copies what everyone else has done doesn't necessarily make you a better angler. But being someone who looks outside the box and looks at actually how the bugs swim and how they look and how they react, and then get your flies to do that, yeah, that does make you a better angler. But just for a blanket statement that being a tyer makes you a better angler, I don't think that's completely true. You know, that's, you know, I'm not criticising people, but you know, you look at the quality of some of the flies that people tie, and they're not very good. You know, they're happy with them and they go and catch fish with them, but the reality is they're not very good. The proportions are all over the place, and but you know, they're happy and each to their own. You know, I wish I'd had more chance to show more people how to do things a little bit better and how to do things a little bit more efficiently.
So is there anything you think you'd do differently starting out fly fishing, especially nowadays, being a new age fly angler?
Yeah, it would have been something I would have liked to have done more of. As teaching, I love teaching. You know, I always have. I love sharing information. You know, I don't believe in this secret men's business, as I've stated a number of times. It's just garbage. You know, we need to share the information, and that's how our sport grows. You know, if we keep looking back to the 50s, you know, we're never going to get anywhere, are we? We're constantly looking backwards, you know. When I went to Sunday school when I was really little, there was a story in one of the Sunday school stories of someone who challenged two boys to cross a snowfield in as straight a line as possible. And one boy set off and he'd take a few steps and look behind him, take a few more steps and look behind, and take a few more steps and look behind, and he was wobbling all over the place. The other boy set a goal and looked at that fence post over there and ran straight to it, and he had a perfectly straight line all the way. So looking backwards, we get nowhere. You know, that's my opinion anyway. It's you know, and I'm just going to touch on tradition in fly tying with the great traditionalists that people talk about from the 50s and that. In their day, they were the innovators. Yeah. They weren't the people looking backwards. They were the people pushing the boundaries. All the people that were looking backwards, they're long dead and gone. They're not here anymore. No one knows or really cares what they did because none of it was relevant. You know, they didn't do anything new. They didn't contribute. You know, but all these, you know, they hold these great traditionalists up now, but, you know, look back in time, they were the innovators. They were the ones pushing the boundaries. You know, and I've never understood why now, in this day and age, people haven't seen that and you know, recognise that there are innovative people out there, and we should be doing everything we can to push them along and keep them going. And it pushes the sport along.
Fly fishing in Australia, what does it mean to you, and how would you like to see it evolve?
Well, fly fishing in Australia, look, it's, you know, this is really hard because there's a thing called climate debate, and trout aren't native to Australia, and if the planet keeps warming the way it has been, although a lot of people are going to deny that, and that's, you know, their opinion, that's their choice, they can do that, but if things keep going the way they are, there's a lot of areas now where trout won't live in 10 years' time or in 15 years' time because it'll be too warm for them. You know, we won't have the water in the creeks that we used to have. Living in Western Victoria, I've already seen this. Our creeks that once upon a time still had good flows on them at this time of year are dried up pools and puddles. You know, and you get a few fish in the pools and that's it. But, you know, so the future of fishing in Australia, or how I'd like to see it go, well, you know, I'd like to see people share information. I'd like to see areas set up as catch and release. I'd like to see areas set up as training grounds. I was recently in Arkansas, and there's a little creek over there where they've got monster fish, you know, 12, 13, 14 pound trout, and it's only for junior anglers. Adults are not allowed fish there. You have to be under 16. It can take a guide in, the guide can take you in, but the angler has to be under 16 to go and fish it. You know, it'd be nice if we had areas like that, particularly, you know, reasonably close to the cities, where we had areas where we could promote catching fish, you know, and promote the handling of fish. I get really annoyed, as a lot of people who fish with me know, that, you know, dragging the fish out of the water and taking 1,400 photos of it, and then get it back in the water. I'd rather just put it back in the water straight away, you know. Get a photo of just it swimming away, that's fine, but, you know, I know people have to do it. I know why they do it. Some of them it's for their brag board, but, you know, most of the people I fish with, it's because they need the photos for the magazines, and I respect that and I understand that, but, you know, those anglers also have to respect that, You know, you can't keep a fish out of the water for a minute and expect it to swim away okay. You know, I often say to people, stop breathing when you pull the fish out of the water and don't have a breath until you've put the fish back in. And then if you can handle it in that amount of time, it's fine. You know, some different species, it doesn't matter that much. You know, fish like bream, you can just about drag them behind the car all the way home and throw them into the bath and they'll swim away. But trout don't do that. Trout get stressed very easily. Yet, you will see a trout with a hole in it where it's been attacked by a cormorant and it's still fine. It's swimming around with a big hole in the side of it. So, but you know, it's... yeah, so the trout fishing, yeah, I'd like to see it really promoted. I'd like to see, they've just stopped putting brown trout into here. They've put Chinook salmon and rainbow trout. This Lake Purrumbete, where we're at the moment, this is a brown trout fishery. This has got weed beds all around the edge of it, and the brown trout come into the edges and they feed in amongst the weeds. And it's a shame that that's the way it's gone. You know, there's other options. We've got a lake out near Cobden, Lake Illinghamite. It'd be really nice to have a bass in there. That's a really, really good little bass fishery. The fish can't escape. There's no creeks coming in or out of it. Lots of weed beds, lots of shallows, lots of surface activity with dragonflies and damselflies and caddisflies and midges. That'd be a really good Australian bass fishery. I say the Victorian government's putting estuary perch in a number of the saltier lakes now, up around Lake Bolac and those sorts of places. So that'll be that'll be an interesting experiment to see how that goes. Hopefully it all works. Hopefully, you know, down the track everybody reaps some benefits from it. You know, but you have to try some of this stuff. If you don't try it, it's, you know, you're never going to know. You know, if it doesn't work, you know, it's a failure. Well, so be it. You know, you've lost a few $1,000s in fish, and that's about all. But you know, if it works out that there's more fish for fishermen to catch, well, there's more people who go fishing, and more people who go fishing come out to these country areas and spend money in these little towns, and that's the economic side of it. And that's what a lot of people they don't kind of realise, that if you've got 100 anglers turn up to the lake and every one of them spends $100 over the weekend, well, that's $10,000 you've brought into your economy. You know, it's that can only be good for small towns, you know, where little towns are suffering. There's not a lot of employment, you know, there's not a lot of anything anymore out in the country. Everything's being pushed into Melbourne, and you know, our little fishers and that live out here, and you know, that's why I loved growing up in Camperdown. I've got Bullimeri and Purrumbete, Illinghamite, Ettrick, all on my doorstep, the Mount Emu Creek, the Hopkins River, the Meri River, to go, you know, snooping around for trout, the Curtis River, the bottom of the Meri and the Hopkins for estuary fishing, and they're all within an hour from where you live. You know, it's no hassle to go and to do stuff. And I got pushed into the bream fishing when I shifted back to Camperdown from Melbourne in '95, because we'd had a drought. There was no water. There was no trout in Bullimeri. There was no water in any of the creeks. So to go fishing, we had to find an alternative. So we launched ourselves into the estuaries. Although we had been fly fishing the estuaries for 20 odd years, it wasn't until we really concentrated on what we were doing and actually went out and tried to learn that we realised what such a good fishery we had and how much fun it was. You know, it was just amazing. It's changed now though, unfortunately. It's not having a go at people. Most people have done nothing wrong, but you know, we were pushing for tighter bag limits on bream way back. You know, there was a few of us, you know, sort of jumping up and down wanting a 2-bag limit, because, you know, once you figure them out and you start catching them, you can catch quite a lot of them. And unfortunately, I've seen in the Hopkins and the Glenelg River, a lot of anglers, with the influx of soft plastics when they first came out, take a lot of fish. Now, I'm not criticising them. At the time they were allowed to do that. They were completely within the law, but they were taking 10 fish today, and then they'd take 10 fish tomorrow, and then they'd go home and they'd be back the following weekend. And if you've got 100 people doing that, all of a sudden that's 2,000 less fish in the river. That's 2,000 less fish to breed. and that has to affect what happens down the track, and it has affected the Hopkins. I've seen a dramatic change in the Hopkins, but you know, it's people have changed now, and most anglers now are a lot more onto the respecting of the fish and the catch and release and respecting the fishery. You know, there's always going to be a couple of morons out there that'll just kill everything they catch, and you know, if they're not breaking any bag limits, they're not really doing anything wrong. But you know, I just don't understand why you'd want to take, you know, a couple of years take 20 fish home or 10 fish home, because half of them are going to get frozen and they're going to be no good anyway. You know, it's eat them fresh. But again, it's each to their own, and if they're not doing anything wrong, you know, we can't complain. You know, it's if they're not breaking any laws, it's they're totally entitled to do what they're doing.
So does Murray Wilson have a legacy he'd like to leave behind? What do you think that might be?
Oh, there's probably a few people out there would say so. Yeah, well, I don't know. You know, there's flies I've designed and flies I've created that I know will still be used in 20, 30 years' time. You know, people will still use BMSs and hammerheads and those sorts of things in 20 or 30 years' time. People will still use Wee Creek hoppers. They should use a stick caddis, but I think that's the only secret I've ever really kept, is exactly what type of tape I used to make the stick caddis with. But I did that for a reason. You know, I was just protecting my income. You know, it's a double-sided poster tape, and I'm happy to tell people that. But the actual make and model number, I had to do a lot of searching to find it. So if you really want to get into it, well, go and do the searching and find it yourself. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, you know, I filmed a DVD. I don't think the DVD was overly successful in amount of sales, but all the flies on there were my designs, and all the flies on there was the first time that they'd been sort of shown on film. So yeah, I suppose that could be classified as a legacy. I don't know. You know, I've done a bit of work on YouTube with Steve Daly now, and when I was in America, and there's a few more little bits and pieces up over there that yeah, are getting quite a few views, and hopefully people will keep watching that for years to come, and you know, and just get the ideas, you know, see a new idea and run with it, see what you can do with it. Don't just do what I've done, just see what you can do with it. You know, use the idea, you know, and that's it, you know, rather than just copy. Use the idea and see what you can do. I do hope to finish my book before things go too pear-shaped. Most of it's written, so even if it's, you know, the end comes a bit quicker, there's a fair bit there. I haven't done any of the newer stuff because I had planned on doing 2 books, but I'll have to sit down in the next few weeks, and that's become a bit of a priority now. That and photographing more mushrooms, and don't ask me why. just something I like doing, walking around the bush photographing mushrooms. It sort of gets you away from everything. You know, fishing does that too, but there's no pressure on with the mushrooms. You don't have to go and pull the camera filter out of the tree, you know, and yeah, like you do with the fly when you're down in the upper Curtis and you land in the trees or the snags. But yeah, you know, it's nice and relaxing, and it's something I like doing. And yeah, photography's always been a little bit of a hobby, and I like taking shots of bugs and mayflies and that sort of thing too. And that's that's a really good thing for people to do, for fly ties to do, because you learn then when you look at the bug, you see, hang on a minute, everyone says the tail should be the same length as the hook shank. Well, hang on, I look at this bug and its body's this long, but its tails are this long. So why am I only putting tails this long on? What am I doing? Am I trying to imitate the insect that has tails this long? Or am I trying to satisfy someone who died 50 years ago because that's what they said you had to do? You know, and that's it. People, you just got to look at what's actually there and try and copy what's there. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to copy nature. You know, it's yeah, fly tying competitions, you won't get any points, but you know, it's not about competition. It's It's about the competitions between you and the fish. And as I've said to you, you know, it's when I showed you one of the first bigger fish down in the Merri, that forget about the fact that it's a big fish. At the moment, it's just a fish with the same brain as those little fish, those little 10-inch fish you catch in the mountain streams. It's got this, given the same set of circumstances, it's going to react in the same way. So forget about the size of it and just concentrate on that little brain and fool it. Once it's eaten the fly, well then yeah, then we have to worry about how big it is and where it's going to go, but it doesn't matter. Then if it gets off, who cares? You're going to let it go anyway. So what's it matter, you know?
There's not much more I want to ask.
Okay, is there any more?
No.
That's it?
I wanted that legacy question.
Alright, well, if that's it, then that's gold.
Do I need to say thank you? No.
No, say thanks, Wilson. Now fuck off. Nah.
Can we just take a photo of us?
Give us a level there, Wilson.
What do you want me to do? Give you a level?
That's fine.
That's a spirit level, is it? That's
Will do.
where it's fucking got a bubble in the middle.
Yes.
And it's a big stick.